If you're watching on LinkedIn and YouTube, welcome to the Job Scam Report podcast. This is Mark Anthony Dyson, and I've been your host for over the last year. Thank you very much for that experience. We are now found in Apple Music, or should I say Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, Spotify, and of course on Substack. If you haven't subscribed to my Substack yet, you're missing out. I am posting content there every week. So for the past 54 weeks, we've had something. I've had over, there's about 90 pieces of content. There's some that are for the paid community, and there's a whole bunch for the free community. So please join us. It doesn't matter how. Love for you to subscribe. And subscription is a little less than the price of Starbucks coffee. Can you imagine? Thank you very much for joining. I have with me today the CEO of Careerspan, Vrijen Attawar. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. And he is the founder of Careerspan. If you haven't taken a look at Careerspan, I'm going to let Vrijen go ahead and explain Careerspan. What is because you guys toggle on a couple of things there, and I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. CareerSpan is a funny company, which means it has different implications for different people. But what I would say to job seekers, and what I think is the most important thing that we do, is we help job seekers get better at developing their professional story. We use conversational coaching to help people reflect on their past experiences in a great amount of detail and depth. And then we use that information that we gather through those conversations to help them in a variety of ways, whether that is generating a hyper tailored resume, whether that is checking against what we know about their goals and preferences to help them know if a job is right for them or not. It's just any number of things that you have a whole universe of possibilities when you actually make the effort to understand the individual that is applying. And that's the most unique thing about us. And in the near future, we're hoping to start more actively leveraging the stuff that we collect during those conversations to help people directly connect to employers and actually have a higher chance of being selected. So that's us in a nutshell.
Right. And I thank you for that explanation. For those of you who are in the chat, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try to catch them. We're going to go about 20, 25 minutes, if that's okay, Region.
Let's do it.
We're going to hit it and quit it. Okay, let's talk about the differences between the fake job and ghost job. And I think people have running definitions of their own. And a lot of times I think I've seen on LinkedIn specifically and really other places where they complain about that every job seems to be a fake job that it doesn't seem to respond to them, but that's not particularly the case. So maybe you
Right.
could give me your running definition. I think is pretty close to mine as to the
hmm
differences between the two.
Now, this is definitely murky territory because it's so easy to use these terms interchangeably, right? The
Right.
way that we look at it is one is more explicitly illegal and unethical. The other is, ostensibly a less than ideal practice, but there are some legitimate and obviously some illegitimate reasons for engaging in it. So to start with the easy one first, fake jobs. A fake job is
Hmm.
literally that. It is a job opportunity that is fake either because it is a front for collecting your data, fake because it is a front for getting you into a scam funnel and essentially trying to finesse money out of you. It's generally one of those two reasons why someone would put these things up. It's generally for data collection or for the purposes of a more explicit scam as opposed to selling your data further down the stream of scams. So that's a fake job, right? Clearly by engaging in it, there's some risk to not just your sanity, but also your personal health, safety, financial safety, etc. A ghost job is a job that a company will put up. So the company itself is legitimate. The opportunity itself may be real insofar as a company is claiming they have an opening, but could still be fugazi because the company has no actual intention of closing that hire. And in that regard, there are a bunch of different reasons why there's a bunch of different reasons why folks would do this, right, in HR. So just some stats for you. Somewhere 40% of folks in HR say that they are aware that their company has posted a sort of ghost job. Another stat is that roughly 70 to 80% of HR folks think that it is somewhat acceptable to post these jobs. And so as to the reasons why, the Sometimes companies will just post it for, again, a data collection purposes. Can we just leave the sort
Right.
of fishing net open and hoover up as many good to great quality candidates despite not really having any intention to, or any strong intention to close on someone? There's also another act called cream skimming, where you'll throw out this very niche, very particular job where it's hard to get candidates as a way of catching this unicorn candidate that may be floating by. Generally, those jobs will really seem too good to be true in some ways, which is, to be
Hmm.
fair, also a feature of fake jobs. But at least as far as ghost jobs are concerned, if it's super niche or super suited to you, you might be just someone that they're hoping to snag. Obviously, there's, which I think is understandable, but speaks more so to the reality that HR doesn't have a great way to cultivate talent, right? The way that we look at hiring
Right.
is very moment in time pressured. They don't have a really great way of saying, hey, I just want to loosely keep tabs on these great people, maybe engage with them on an ongoing basis. If they had that option, a really easy way to do, which is something that we're actively working on, but if they had that sort of avenue, our feeling is that there would be a lot fewer of these ghost jobs posted. So I'll pause there and go in a direction that you'd like, but that's the lay of the land.
And that's a great lay of the land. I agree with everything that you've seen. I think the data collection has become an asset for
Mm-hmm.
companies that do it. They because we've seen even recently that even as broken down as Career Builder and Monster had been, he was
Mm-hmm.
still able to sell nine figures. My opinion, they had the assets as far as names,
Mm-hmm.
numbers, the resumes, and their database they've been collected for 25 or so years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's another sort of, that's a whole separate topic, why these companies
Right,
shouldn't be
right.
tied
But
to
I just
these
want
technologies. But no, I just wanted to validate that. Yeah.
because companies are they're doing it for more than one, but the long game
Uh,
definitely serves them for sure. Now, the importance of job seekers understanding, from your view, the differences between a fake job and a real job. Of course, they've got to do the work first before they
mhm.
figure, in most cases, because the fake jobs are from fake companies to
Yep.
make it look like a real job as much as they possibly can. And the trend still remains that they even create fake companies with false URLs to take people there.
Completely, completely. And I would add to that, and I'm glad we you zoned in on this idea. They take advantage of a honest to God, like, stress, desperation response in people. It's clinically proven that psychological pressure, like the stuff that you experience when you're job hunting and you haven't heard back and you're really stressed about wanting to land a role before your rent comes due. In these situations, folks have a bias towards things that sound too good to be true because they really want them to be true. And there's
Right,
also the fact that under that pressure, a lot of your cognitive faculties are short circuited because of that stress. Now, what that means is that you look at a job that when you were fully gainfully employed and happy with your life, wouldn't even take two looks at. But under this sort of, and it's unfortunate because they're intentionally targeting these folks that in a mechanism very similar to the Nigerian prince scams that we've heard of in the
right.
90s and 2000s.
Hmm.
They are, but instead of them being so dumb that they would only really appeal to folks that would give that quality of writing or that quality of scam a pass, they're
Right,
instead going for folks that are hopeful, right? Because underneath all of that stress is hope that I can actually get a job that I want, that something can really work out for me. So it's a completely despicable sort of activity run by the lowest of the low as far as scammers are concerned, because they're really preying on people's desire to seek out these opportunities. The other thing I would say is your resume is actually a massive vector for personal information. We include our
hmm,
LinkedIn, we include our phone number, we include multiple emails sometimes. We provide a detailed, essentially biographical information about where we've lived and the companies we worked at. The resume, as was pointed out to me recently by someone, is actually just a massive point of failure in our overall data security. We
hmm.
do hand it out so freely, and so that's what these fake jobs are reliant on. And it can lead to anything from identity theft to just a sort of classic like referral scam.
And the job seeker, for the most part, can do everything they possibly can to even make sure that they're not putting out there in public, but with the job boards that are available and the data storage breaches that we've had even recently, like
Mm-hmm.
Workday and some of the many
Mm-hmm.
others that have happened, the exploitation goes way beyond what the person's efforts becomes, because they put a lot of time in tweaking, make sure it's right and all that. And a lot of times, even though that's overwork,
Hmm.
you like in the weight room, you're overtraining, so to speak. You are also have built some things in the resume that make it overexposure. Now I know what the
Hmm.
arguments are going to
Hmm.
be, because I have colleagues that's their business. I understand, but still, these days and age, you can't get the information updated enough, like the
Hmm.
name, having people still putting their addresses on there makes them now two times
Hmm.
as
Yeah,
vulnerable than they ever been. Yeah, I think there needs to be something different to make it
absolutely.
safer.
Absolutely, absolutely. We live in such a deeply technological era that the points of failure are everywhere,
Right.
from the person that you send your PDF resume to, all the way to a lot of these identity companies getting hacked. And
Hmm.
that sucks. I don't want to give my biometric data to some random ass company,
Right.
frankly. And so I think and those are even companies hired by legitimate employers. So there's just a lot that the modern job seeker needs to be careful of, to take into account. And certainly, I've been such a huge fan of how you are exposing the scam jobs and the fake jobs, because I think that they are, and the ghost jobs, because they are such a scourge and they waste so much of people's time and just make everyone way worse off and unhappier by simply existing.
Let's go on the other side. Let's say
Uh
we
huh.
have successful job candidates that get hired. Now, would it, my opinion, I know what my opinion is. I want to hear what
Uh
yours
huh.
is about the candidates, making sure or being able to ask how companies are keeping their employees safe from possible fake employees and the breaches, and keeping their information safe, because once they become an employee they're even more vulnerable because they're giving financial information at that particular point.
And I think partially there is a lot of belief in the baseline enterprise software that is used. And I
Mhm.
think some of it rightly, like the biggest companies
Right.
also have the most to lose. And for a workday, the size of the lawsuit they're about to see is, incomprehensible for leaking that kind of data. And so I think
Hmm.
that even though it does happen as evidenced by that example, I think there is largely in companies a belief that if you administer stuff, you get relatively strong security results. The bigger concern is when companies try to do things through informal channels, right? So this is actually a
Right.
great signal for a fake job, is if they tell you to send stuff over Telegram or WhatsApp, be a little suspicious. Certainly, I would say no employer worth their salt that is, I would argue, largely in a position to pay someone a legitimate salary, they're probably using some degree of more, let's say, like legitimate or formal processes. So at the very least, using email. Companies actually,
Right.
it's in their interest to maintain a paper trail. And even though email seems pretty casual, that I would say is more in the realm of what is acceptable as far as, hey, apply through this. But then there's also little things like looking at the actual address. And when I say address, I mean clicking into the to field and seeing what is the specific email address and domain slug that is
Hmm.
attached, because that's a really easy way. It's very easy to change the name of the sender as is rendered by your app, but it's much harder to change the actual email itself. And that's a big way that folks essentially pretend to be from certain companies when they're actually not. There was a meme going around of someone, I saw a bunch of folks post that the vice president of Merrill Lynch is reaching out to you out of the blue and they're like a third degree contact, be suspicious. So I think that is the exercising of good sort of critical faculties and being confident as an employee that, hey, this, the way I'm sending this information to you is not actually safe. Can we go through a much more secure channel? This is my personal private information. I think any company that you want to work for would respect that sort of request, because I think that is the bare minimum, both respect and effort that a company should put into making their employees and candidates feel safe.
Yeah, and you mentioned critical thinking, something I really have talked about in the past, that
Mm.
really we've been trying to get job seekers to do for the last 15, 16 years. The ones that do it are winning, and you can't
Mhm.
find one that keeps a steady stream of jobs who hasn't been, or who doesn't put themselves at least in the shoes of the employer to try to appeal. But this time we're asking them to put yourself also in the hands or in through the lens of a job scammer,
Mm.
You got to think, how would you be vulnerable and to create the invulnerability, if you
Mhm.
will, to avoid being scammed or being misled.
Absolutely. And I was very much the kind of person that was far more judgy about
Yeah,
scams and people getting scammed. And the reality
sure.
is that I've learned what, because I've had some close calls myself. I think the reality is, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how educated you are. Anyone can be approached by a message that just triggers the presses on the right vulnerability at the right time and approaches you. I think it's just hard, right? There's so many
It is hard.
attacks on our identity and our safety just in general in a broad sense of the term online, that I think that it's always a good reminder to tell folks, right? No one can be perfect, but to the extent that we destigmatize the idea of asking questions and standing up for what you think is the appropriate way to be treated, especially in formal processes like hiring, I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah. Now, as far as I know, you've coached a whole slew of people, and between you and your co-founder, because you guys, that's how you started, right? You started out coaching
Hmm.
people, helping a whole bunch of people. And I don't know if you're doing it these days, but the AI tools are plentiful. Are there any
Hmm.
particular that you use, or that there's techniques a job seeker can use to help them discern the difference between the fake job descriptions and the real job descriptions, finds that these are AI generated red flags that they should avoid?
Great question, super pertinent. I think this is gonna sound strange coming from an AI CEO,
Okay.
but
All
I,
right.
I actually would be more wary of the average AI tool than I would
Mhm.
be of the average non-AI tool, because I think, and I'll explain my reasoning. I think there's
That's
certain
fair.
tools that operate. An AI tool is essentially probabilistic, right? What it's generating is a reflection of the probabilities that it believes are
Hmm.
relevant to a particular response, and then it generates a probabilistic response. So there is always a margin of error with
Right.
AI tools. And depending on
Hmm.
how effectively the AI tools have been set up and how the agents interact with each other in the background, there could be more or less of a margin of error. So my
Hmm.
first port of call would actually be the traditional techniques of looking someone up on Glassdoor, looking someone up on the Better Business Bureau. There's certain products, I believe one is called Scam Advisor, that I looked up recently, that cross compares against a database of folks leaving reviews about scams and reporting scams. And
Okay.
those are a little bit more, I would say, consistently reliable. I think with AI, the downside risk of it hallucinating or making something up and saying, yeah, this is fine, is pretty high. So I guess at minimum, I would say don't just use the AI tool. Try to have multiple. I generally look for 2 or 3 points of sketchiness, I would say, in order to dismiss something outright. And even I could do a much better job of that.
Right.
We try to comb through some job boards recently, and this is a whole separate type of scam, but are job boards that charge you for seeing the JD, right? Nobody's
Hmm.
got a JD worth charging you for. Believe me, that's, if companies are trying to monetize that way, that means they suck at business, or they suck, or their business is to suck you dry. So broadly speaking, I would say I think, like, knowing the source, knowing the provenance. If you see a job board, if you see a job under a company's name, it sounds super appealing on a pretty random job board. I would say most large companies, they will post on the more traditional sort of LinkedIn style job boards. And so just cross referencing, saying, hey, if companies posted to job boards r us dot whatever, or some sort of
Hmm.
sketchy domain, just, and it's a big company, check on LinkedIn, right? They're more likely to be checking that platform anyway. A lot of these job boards are resurfaced.
They'll
So
be
that's
checking.
that's where.
They'll be checking for people. That
Yes.
really, LinkedIn is the best way to check for people, and to maybe even engage in a
Hmm.
conversation rather than going through their job board, because really they're generated at scale. So they're
Yes.
generating thousands of job boards, not just the one or two people see them on. But having said that, though, there's something to be said about the job boards that are just aggregating all these job boards into
Hmm.
one and saying this is a great place when you don't know and don't know how to check to see if a job is legitimate.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's just so hard, and it's one of those things that you develop a feel for over time,
Right.
especially when you don't hear back from a certain job for a while, which I should also raise is another sort of distinguishing characteristic between fake jobs and ghost jobs. Fake jobs will get back to you right away. They will be
Right.
the happiest people on the planet. That's part of the psychological manipulation, right? But
Mhm.
that's something to be wary of as well. But yeah, I think you're totally right. I think cross-referencing, checking against multiple places, it's no longer enough to know if companies have a domain. I could spin up a pretty compelling website in minutes on one of these AI tools, right? So
Sure.
so we have to be adapting to where technology is as well. Now the standard really should be, hey, do they have legitimate CV employees on LinkedIn, right?
Yep.
Basically, every
Absolutely.
legitimate company will have a LinkedIn page. Check on that. Even if it isn't maintained, see if people are actively linking themselves to that company as employees, because that's another sort of great way to tell.
Yeah, and then try to even talk to the employees,
That's right.
even though you gotta look at it again from through the eyes of skepticism first, not
Mhm.
validation first. It's becoming much more work now front before they even start.
Absolutely. In fact, hey, you could do one better. Look at ex-employees, right? Which generally there's a bias towards
Yes.
hearing maybe some slightly more negative stuff, but frankly, should
Mhm.
probably know that regardless. But there's also those folks have no reason
Right.
to be supportive of that company. So if they
Right.
point out sketchiness in the hiring process, that's a clear signal.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great stuff, Vision. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Job Scan Report. Did you want
Yeah,
to
my
add
pleasure.
anything? Did you want to add anything before we sign off?
No, just really appreciate your time. I think the main thing that I would tell folks is, again, be wary of AI solutions to your job hunting problems. Again, I say
Mhm.
that as someone that's very confidently willing to put his tool up against others, but it's saying that more broadly because there is a lot of stuff that in this sort of space that doesn't actually move the needle. And so being really critical, looking at other reviews, looking for social signals, I think those are really important things in this age of AI because the bad AI tools can actually hurt you more than help.
That's great. You've been listening to Vrijen Attawar of Career Span. I want to say span career, but Career Span. And people can find Career Span at,
www.mycareerspan.com.
very good, don't forget to put the MY, careerspan.com. And thank you to the rest of you for joining us. A lot of people are going to catch the replay, they'll catch
Hmm.
it on YouTube. And you could just find me, Mark Anthony Dyson. In the meantime, thank you much for joining me and stay scam free.
Stay scam free, y'all.